Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. My name is Mia Hemstad, and on this channel, I talk about motherhood and mental health and postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. And today is a super special day because I have an interview with Marissa Zuito. Everybody, this is Marissa, and I'm so excited because she has so much knowledge to share with us. Marissa is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm going to have her introduce herself more in detail, but really quickly, I want you to know how I know Marissa because it's a really cool story. So when in January, I think it was, I was wondering if I had postpartum depression. I was pretty sure. I had just had my second baby. She was 3 months old, and I was talking with my nurse midwife, and she said that she believes I had postpartum depression. She referred me to Postpartum Support International, which is an organization that I tell you guys about all the time. You can get a ton of free resources and someone to talk to if you're struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety or any sort of perinatal mood disorders. So I highly recommend them, and I'll link them down in the description. But basically, Marissa was listed as someone to talk to in my area. So that is amazing, by the way, Marissa, like that you do that. Like I was able to text Marissa. She texted me back right away. We arranged a call, and all of a sudden I was on the phone with a licensed marriage and family therapist for free to just talk to you about my emotions. I remember my 2-year-old was like clamoring on me. My 3-month-old was crying. I was changing a diaper and on the phone with you, and you were just so empathetic and so kind. And that really was the beginning of me getting help because I had postpartum depression and anxiety really badly with my first child, and I never got help for it. And so calling you was really the beginning of me taking it seriously because you also confirmed, yes, I think that you need to go seek professional help. And you recommended your book, Postpartum Happiness. And I bought it. And by the way, I'm definitely recommending it to all of you. It's really short. So, I mean, the first thing we think of as moms is, are you joking? I don't have time to read a book. But it was super short. I got it on Audible. I literally listened to it in the evening while just doing evening chores and taking care of my kids. It was so relatable, so validating, so helpful. And one of the gems that really helped me was the idea of defining motherhood for yourself, what it should look like for you, Marissa. And I teach that in my course, the Motherhood Thrive Guide, and a lot on my YouTube channel because I really think it's so key to a woman's mental health, a mother's mental health, to define motherhood in accordance with our own personal values, because who we are is still unique, right? You know, just because we become mothers doesn't mean I'm no longer Mia. It doesn't mean you're no longer Marissa with our unique desires, values, talents, dreams. So I'm so excited. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So before I get any more into it, I just wanted you guys to know how I know Marissa. It was such an organic, like, kind of miraculous divine timing relationship that formed, and we finally got to meet in person a few weeks ago, which was amazing. But Marissa, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. So I was a therapist first, and then had my baby, and my world just turned upside down, and just really dedicated my practice afterwards to working with moms. And my story is a little bit different in that I'm kind of adding to postpartum depression and postpartum mood disorders in that I'm kind of validating any mom that's struggling that may not necessarily fit clinical postpartum depression, because I'm not sure I did in the beginning, but I was a mom daring to say, I don't like this, and I've missed my old life, and I'm not bonded with my baby, and I'm actually having some regret about it. And I think if I had gotten the right validation, the right support, I think it could have prevented a lot of misery on my part. And then as my story goes, it did turn into clinical depression at that point, and I'm not sure it had to. So I kind of look at it from both sides, because I am a clinician, and yet I'm adding this other piece, which is kind of non-clinical, you know, for any mom that isn't sure. And I get asked that question all the time. I don't know if I have postpartum depression, and I always say, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not necessarily interested in diagnosing you. Just let's get you some support. Let's get you feeling the way you thought you would, or the way you want to, or at least clear up some misconceptions, or you know, for me it was like, what's wrong with me? Why aren't I as happy as my neighbor? Or my own mom. So yes, the irony is that I'm a clinician and yet I'm kind of adding a non-clinical approach or theory, if you
Which
will.
I love. I love that about your book. And by the way, you guys, I've read it twice. Like, it's really good. And I'll probably keep revisiting it because what she's saying, what Marissa's saying is that she's not like saying that you're sick if you don't like motherhood. And that's what I thought was
Exactly.
so unique. Your book has a focus on, look, you know, you might really regret this choice that you made in the beginning, at least. You might really feel like, what did I do? You might feel really unhappy. And that doesn't mean that you're broken or impaired. You know, we kind of define like unhappiness with, oh, you must be sick. But it could just be that what you entered into, motherhood, might not have lived up to your expectations. And that's okay. And like you were saying, if you had been set up with the right expectations, you probably wouldn't have plummeted into depression. And I think that too. And you have a lot of commentary in the beginning about you had expectations about the bonding experience, about the birth experience. And if we just set women up to have more realistic expectations, like, hey, your birth might not go how you want. Hey, everyone says your kid's going to sleep through the night by 6 months, but yours might not. And here's what to do if that doesn't happen. Because what happens when our expectations aren't met that everyone's telling us is supposed to happen, we think there's something wrong with us. Like, how many of you watching this, let me know in the comments, someone asked you, are you exclusively breastfeeding? Is your baby sleeping through the night? Are you doing baby-led weaning? Is he eating solids? And anytime you had to answer no or answer a different way than they wanted, you felt like, oh God, I'm not doing it right. And that is what makes us feel like failures instead of just everyone having different expectations for themselves. I love that about your book. So a question I wanted to ask you about that was kind of the commentary you provided on, you know, women don't need to be they don't need to be labeled or diagnosed with a mood disorder to benefit from talk therapy or to need talk therapy, right? Because it's like we almost think that unless you have a diagnosis, you don't need support, right? Unless you're really sick, you don't need to see someone or to talk to someone. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, kind of same thing. It's like, don't worry. It's tricky. It's a little tricky, but my first go-to would just, let's just not worry about the diagnosis part of it. Let's just get you some support. You know, and then we can talk about options. The irony for me is that I feel like it was more situational, right? Because if we look at depression, we know there's different types, right? So sometimes there's chemical and hormonal, and sometimes it's situational. But we don't really talk about that with postpartum. We just we just assume, oh, it's hormonal and chemical, right? Because we know factually that hormones play a part in mood and whatnot. So even if it is situational, which I feel like it was for me, sometimes the course of action is still going to be an antidepressant, right? So I might sound a little I might contradict myself a little bit. I mean, I'm not, but it might sound.
You're not. It's basically like seeing that. Yeah, because even in my understanding of mental health, because I struggle with anxiety for sure and depression in seasons, it's like the idea that unless it's like people are like, oh, it's get your hormones figured out, Mia. Like, go get checked, and go see a naturopath or get your hormones in alignment. And I'm not against that. And I've already did all the thyroid tests. Like, what happens when all those tests come back and I still feel sick?
Yeah.
I still feel like I can't get out of bed. I still feel like I'm dreading every day. I'm like, oh God, I have to go to the playground tomorrow. You know, it's like, there's something wrong there. But then you go to all these doctors and they're telling you everything looks fine. All the tests are coming back negative in a good way, right? And so what I talk about your book is you're like, you are bringing light to the fact that there is such a thing as situational depression. I mean, I didn't get help with my first child, but the depression lifted when he turned 1. And I'll tell you why. I had started working full time. again on work that I was great at, and he started sleeping through the night.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I wasn't waking up 4 and 5 times, and I was breastfeeding significantly less. And it was like I was able to restore part of myself that I had lost for that year. And so I just think, having that intervention would have been amazing sooner. Someone saying, hey, what are the things that make you sad? And then I would have opened up and said, well, I'm sad that I'm not working anymore. Well, I'm sad that I'm not doing this. Well, I'm sad that I'm so tired all the time. Like, it might have encouraged me to sleep train my son sooner. And like, that's not going to break him. He's going to be okay. So I think one of the messages that I think we're both trying to share here is that it's possible that your hormones are just fine and you can still be depressed, and you can still be struggling to leave the house from anxiety of, oh no, what if I go to that restaurant and my kid screams the whole time? Right? It's like, and you mentioned that, I think, in your book too. You went through, what's amazing is Marissa goes through all these different scenarios where we have all of these expectations of what we hope our kids will do and that they don't. And man, I felt so much of what you went through, and it's amazing how the way I had to find you and read your book in order to just feel validation when I probably interact with hundreds of mothers in a week, right? Just at the store and around, and it's like, it's so hard. We don't talk about this, like the cracked bleeding nipples, the reflux, the vomiting, like the issues with your spouse that come up after because you just, why don't you feed them the way I want you to feed them? All these things. So I just think that was amazing. So, I had another question for you. Man, what was the main benefit that you received after you wrote the book? Like, did you feel like it was kind of therapy for you? Because you said you wrote it when your daughter was 4.
Yeah, between 3 and 4. Yeah, that's a great question. It was incredibly therapeutic because I was so committed to kind of getting to the bottom of this, what I call like a phenomenon that I didn't think was being talked about, which is, situational or non-clinical. And so in my book, and part of my research is all these anonymous mom quotes. How many moms can I get quoted to say the very thing that I was scared to say, such as, one of them is a mom was saying, I confessed to my husband one night that I feel like we'd made a mistake. I mean, it's so taboo and yet so raw and so real. And I feel like I didn't, those aren't my words, but I could have said those words. And so I think I have about 20 or more anonymous mom quotes where I want another mom to go, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I felt that way too, but I wouldn't dare say that out loud or say that to, whoever. So it was incredibly therapeutic. And just the feedback I've gotten is, it just warms my heart that, thank you so much for writing this. And I feel relief. And maybe too, with that postpartum depression piece of like, I didn't know where I fit. I don't think I had depression, but I wasn't happy. So it's like I kind of could maybe, put that piece of the puzzle in there. And I'm still looking at this piece. There might be another book in me. I don't know, but like to continue this conversation. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So yeah, that's one of the things that I think, anyone who's watching this, who's struggling in motherhood, and you're thinking like there has to be something wrong, and maybe you've gone to all the doctors and you went to all the appointments and you still haven't gotten to the bottom of it. I think just start asking the questions that Marissa was asking herself and that I've been asking myself this year. Like, okay, what is it about motherhood that makes me so frustrated or unhappy or unfulfilled? And being brave enough to admit to yourself that maybe you're unfulfilled right now. It doesn't mean that your partner is not great or that your children aren't beautiful, but you can still be unfulfilled. You're allowed to have something going on. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. And so like Marissa went through, and even me just having this channel, it is therapeutic. And I try to make sure that as I go through my stuff, I come to all of you with, hey, this is what I've learned. This is what I figured out. The takeaways, like as same with Marissa, your book was so helpful. But there is a huge benefit to just asking these questions and getting to the bottom of it. Even if you just took time out on a Saturday morning to go to your favorite coffee shop and just write and write and write your feelings, it is so therapeutic to get to the bottom of what you're feeling, and then maybe go discuss it with a friend or discuss it with a therapist or discuss it with someone and go, okay, I'm thinking of going back to work, even though I technically financially don't need to. Am I crazy? Does that make me a bad mom? I'm thinking of starting to supplement with formula because I'm so tired of breastfeeding all the time and I want to leave the house and not worry about pumping. Does that make me a bad mom? It's like all these little nuances that could be making you feel more fulfilled and making motherhood a little bit more easier, because this idea that we've been fed that every aspect of motherhood needs to be hard in order for it to be rewarding is a complete lie. I have been on a mission to make motherhood easier, and I have never been happier, never been more present with my kids, never have been enjoying my life more. And it's such a lie that everything needs to be sacrificed. It's like, well, if you're not sacrificing, you don't love your kids. There's already a lot of sacrifice naturally built into motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
We give birth. I mean, if that's not enough sacrifice for the next decade, I don't understand what, like, I don't understand. Are we gluttons for punishment? I don't get it. So, it's kind of removing that shame around making things easier, whether that's getting your groceries delivered or, I don't know, committing to eating out once a week or hiring a sitter just so that you can take a nap and take a shower if that's something that you can afford.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that in the book, one of the things that stuck with me, and this is hilarious, is you said, I decided to work full-time, part-time. You decided to work part-time and put your daughter in full-time childcare.
Yes.
Even though, you were only working part-time. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Again, it's kind of, I don't know, edgy or taboo. Maybe not.
People
maybe
like,
not.
what do you mean? But what do you do with all your extra time?
Yeah. No, and my own inner voice is like, well, wait a minute, you're not at work, but you're not with your baby. It's that kind of idea that, baby needs their mom, and of course, there's a ton of mothers who work full time, whether it's by choice or financial, but to dare, to do it part time and yet leave my baby full time. But boy, it was a game changer for me, huge. Like I could breathe again. I could do the things I used to love, which was a huge part of my depression. Is I missed my life. I grieved my old life. And I wanted to exercise without pushing a stroller, right? Or wearing my baby, which I did plenty of times. But the days that I could come home in the afternoon to a quiet home and take a nap because I was still exhausted, or exercise or have lunch with a friend and pick my daughter up, at 5:00 and be happy. I think as you're talking about all these things we should be doing and whatnot, but I realized how valuable my happiness was for my daughter, not the list of, my breastfeeding, am I this, am I that? It was like, no, am I happy to be with her? And for me, it was about quality of time with her, not quantity. And I found a lovely, maybe this is my own, I don't know what the word is, but like, biased or whatever, but I found a great daycare for her. She loved it. She was happy. So I guess that's the word I'm looking for. I'm justifying it. But I mean, that's life. When we want to be here, we can't be there, and we have to do the best we can to have it be a win-win, that she's happy and I'm happy.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to highlight that is because something as simple as that, and we know obviously that not everyone can afford to do that, and you express that, that it's a privilege and like an amazing thing that that you work toward. But I just want everyone to hear this example, and because for me, at the time of reading this, I couldn't do that. I mean, I'm still working toward that. However, it stuck with me because it just was liberating to hear that a mother would choose something out of a desire to just take good care of your emotional, mental, physical needs. It was like you were so dialed in to, no, if I don't take care of myself and make these decisions, no one is going to do it for you. And I think me and a lot of other women are like waiting for someone to just like do it for us and say, no, let me set this up for you. Because taking 100% responsibility and making the decision to go back to work part-time and put your daughter in full-time daycare it's a decision that you have to take responsibility for. And a lot of us don't want to make decisions because we're scared that if it doesn't work out, then we're going to regret it or it's our fault. But I think it's so important to just dare to go and try it. And if you find that you really don't like it, it doesn't work out, you can change it. Your kid is not going to be scarred. You can pull them out of daycare if you want. It's going to be okay. And I think that's one thing we think, it's because there's a huge weight we feel as parents, because we're fostering human lives, we're fostering the future that we don't want to mess up. And that's completely realistic. However, on the opposite side of that is, one of the best things that you can do for your kids is be a happy, fulfilled presence. And there's a great study on it. I break it down in my course, but I'm going to leave the link to the study because it actually goes through this data that shows that children benefit from quality time with a parent that's not anxious, stressed, or depressed. And that means that you have to prioritize not being anxious, stressed, or depressed. So what are the things that you need to do in order to make that happen? And for everyone, it's different. And for you, it looks like going back to work part-time and being able to come home and take a nap in the afternoon. Like, I live and die by my naps. Like, I run my kids out in the morning and they both nap simultaneously. And I know I'm lucky, but I work really hard to make that happen, because then I have a 2-hour break while they're asleep, and it enables me to be present and happy in the afternoons until my husband gets home. And it's just a game changer for afternoons. So for everyone, it looks different. Like, you know, for me right now, that's making sure that my kids are napping simultaneously. So for you watching this, it could be joining a mom's group. It could be trading childcare with a friend. I just did that for the first time yesterday, where I traded childcare hours with somebody and that I trust, obviously. And it was so nice. And we were both refreshed after just a few hours of helping each other. So I don't know. It's so funny because you might have thought that was, you know, it's a game changer, but just that anecdote that you shared, I was like, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, what does this look like for me? So I just challenge all of the moms watching this, like, what does that look like for you? If you're feeling unfulfilled, if you're feeling frustrated, just admit that you are and try to figure out what are the small tweaks that you can do to start bringing back in things that make you happy. Because as we know from science and research, when you're happy, that makes your kids feel safe, loved. You're more likely to give them affection. You're more likely to be more patient with your kids when you're happier. So it's just the positive ripple effects of taking great care of yourself is amazing. And I love that you said that you took time for social interaction, exercise, sleep, like all of these things. They're so important. And for some reason, we think that we should just throw those things out when we become mothers, when I think we need it more than ever. Like, if anything, more than ever, I need exercise. I'm carrying kids all the time. And it's not that people are like, oh, carrying kids makes you stronger. If anything, I needed to strengthen my back so that I didn't pull a muscle when my toddler throws himself down in the aisle at Target. Like, I was like, no, you need to strengthen yourself. But yeah, so I love that example. And I'm getting carried away in conversation. I'm forgetting my questions. But what was I going to say? I guess, how did you handle people?
No, I love it. I
think
you were
like, did you have guilt when people would say things like, what do you do with all that extra time? Or why do you have her in full-time childcare when you're only working part-time? How did you handle those comments?
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't know that I got comments around that per se, because I could kind of hide out in my daughter's in daycare. It's a pretty normal thing. I will share though, the comments that did bother me were, when are you going to have another baby? And that's part of my journey, part of my story too, is I decided to be one and done. And whether that's for another mom to be two and through is another kind of phrase I'd heard, or whatever it is. And even if it's having 5 kids, but it's as you said, daring to make that decision for you, not for society, or really taking care of yourself. But you said it best, where it's like, just experiment. If the guilt may be there with the daycare, so just notice it, and then just kind of see. And for me, the pros outweigh the cons, but the guilt started to diminish, and the self-care started to feel better. And so it was a no-brainer. Like, oh, I could never go back to working full time. Yeah, so you nailed it. Just kind of take that step, take that leap of faith and try it.
Yes, I love that. And I want to point out something that you mentioned, like the guilt was there, but you just kind of acknowledge it and it let it pass through. Because one of the
Yeah.
things I think we learned, and I grew up in a very religious household, and I'm still religious, by the way, but
Yeah.
I've come to realize that there are certain things that I've adopted that aren't necessarily true in my adult.
Yeah.
So when we were kids and we do something wrong, we feel guilt. I mean, and when we're adults and we feel guilt around doing something wrong, it's there for a purpose. But sometimes guilt is there and it's not supposed to be there. Guilt is there as a response to a rule that maybe is not gospel, right? That maybe, why do I feel guilt around putting my kid in daycare when I don't quote unquote need to? And then you can acknowledge the guilt and realize, oh, well, it's because my mom or my aunt or my grandmother has always told me that a
Yeah.
mom should stay home with her kids all day and be the full-time caregiver. And then you can
Right.
acknowledge that standard, that benchmark that you feel like you're failing or messing up. And you can go, oh, well, I know that that's not true for me. That's
Hmm.
not the fact of life. It's not gospel truth, whatever. And you can choose to define your own new benchmark. And that's like a whole process I teach is like, go through all these things that make you feel guilty and ask yourself, is there actually a purpose here for this guilt? Or do I
Right.
just feel like I'm failing somebody else's benchmark? Because if
Yes.
you allow other people to define all the rules in your life, then you're always going to feel like you're failing. So
Hmm.
I encourage people, and I had this huge light bulb moment as I was going through therapy this year was, oh, I feel like a failure whenever I feed my kids PB&J because I'm comparing myself to this person on Instagram who apparently feeds her kids Whole30 meals 3 times a day.
I know.
Oh, I feel like a failure when I don't take my kids outside every single day because I'm comparing myself to this person. And so
Right.
all of a sudden I started to write down all the things that made me feel like a failure. And then I just crossed them out and wrote down my new rules, my own defined rules that work for Mia. And so I just want to encourage all of you to go through this exercise that I had to go through in therapy to really define all the rules. Who makes the rules? You make the rules. You get
Yeah.
to make the rules for your motherhood journey. And, for Marissa, that was deciding to be one and done. Even though that was really challenging for you, I think you mentioned
Hmm.
like it was a time sensitive matter,
Oh yeah.
your age and like your husband wanted to have another one, but you had to decide based on your experience and your need for personal well-being, like in order
Yeah.
to be healthy for the daughter we do have, I am deciding to be one and done. And that's a big decision. So I just want to say, like, defining your own rules, it's not easy and not everyone is going to be happy with you about it. But at the end
Right.
of the day, and this is how I always approach things, challenging decisions, when I'm lying on my deathbed, I'm not going to be grateful or happy that I let everyone else define my rules. Like, therein lies Mia. She never disappointed anybody. Like, it's like you
Mm.
don't want that to be your thing. You want to be like, therein lies Mia. She lived boldly and dared to live according to her own values and her own dreams. And she made sure that she was fulfilled and her children learned
Right.
to live a fulfilled life because of it, because our kids are learning from us. So I just think that is bold and it is daring. And I want people to know that, like, when you make these decisions and you define your own rules, it's going to be uncomfortable at first. You might experience a little bit of guilt, but you need to just like acknowledge that it's there and go, oh, I feel guilty because of some other rule that so and so placed on me. But this guilt is misplaced guilt. This is not the right feeling for this, but it's a natural discomfort for choosing to live differently than how everyone else is telling me to live. So I know that was a long explanation, but this
Right.
is really important. Like, this is really, like, for me, that's what I pulled out of your book was, how can I start to experiment with things that fulfill me to define motherhood for myself? And it's just been so
Yeah.
great. It's been so fun. It's been so fun to just kind of like figure out how I'm going to do it differently. And I promise all of you watching that the more you practice this and experiment, the easier you'll get. Because again, like you said, Marissa, you'll feel the pros. You'll start to feel so happy and fulfilled and energized. And
Yeah.
why did I take so long to do this? So
Yep.
man,
Exactly.
I feel like okay, so I have one more question and then I'll let you end on whatever you want. But I guess what's one thing that you want to tell a woman who maybe be, I guess she just feels like she's just failing at everything. She's
Mm.
really sad. She wanted so badly to become a mom. Like, she had this
Yeah.
idealized version. I'm going to get
Yes.
married. I'm going to have my babies and I'm going to cook all my food. I'm talking about past Mia. I was so excited for the stay-at-home
Yeah.
mom. was idealized in my head. And then she got there, and now she's just really hating it. And she feels like none of her friends understand, and that if she says anything, that she's going to sound ungrateful for the blessing that she has.
Yeah.
What would you tell that woman?
Oh gosh, just that she's not alone. And there's so many unknowns. For some, that ideal does happen. You know, they have a great birth, and you know, there's oxytocin flowing, and maybe the baby is perfectly healthy, and their what do they call it? Their not personality, but their temperament, right? It's just peaceful and wonderful. And that was not, none of that really happened for me. And so I would just kind of paint a picture of sometimes, well, and I kind of do this. I have an article on my website, which I can end with, but it's the 12 Taboo Postpartum Truths, what you may need to know but probably haven't been told. And I would probably maybe go through that list and see if some of that applies to her. If her baby's difficult, if she's having regret, if she misses her old life, maybe breastfeeding didn't work out. There's just a million and one things that can go wrong. And there's just so many unknowns when we're pregnant, with our first, at least, you know, it's that ideal, like you said. And it's hard because for some that ideal becomes a reality, and for others it's just, for me, it was so many things went wrong all at once, and I couldn't have ever predicted that.
Right.
So I would get her hooked up to the right moms and get her reading my book and on your channel, and, you know, let her know she's not alone.
Yeah. Oh, you need to send me that article so I can link it into the description
Okay.
if anyone wants to read it. But yeah, basically, if you're watching this and you are in the situation that I was in January of this year, where I just felt so broken, like second time around, right? Second baby. And here I am still hating this job, still feeling so lost and so sad. And knowing that I wasn't alone, knowing that I'm allowed to break the rules and make my own, knowing that I'm allowed to experiment and my kids are going to be okay. And then coming out on the other side of it, knowing that you will come out on the other side of this after experimentation, and knowing that you're not alone and connecting with other women. I mean, that's really key. And even if that other woman is me on this channel or Marissa in her book, because at the time I really didn't know anybody who dared to break the rules other than Marissa. And and I didn't meet her in person until recently. So, you know, it's okay. Like, if you don't know anyone in your circles, or maybe people aren't being fully honest, like, that doesn't mean you're an odd one out. I promise you that there are so many women who feel this way. We're just kind of in the shadows. A lot of people just are like sliding into my DMs saying, thank you so much for your content, because I've been feeling this way and I didn't want to say it because my mom would be so upset with me, you know, things like that. But it's possible to actually find a path that you really enjoy in motherhood. Like, I really do now at the end of the line of, yeah, like, you know, I can sit here and say that after a lot of experimentation and trial and error, and I'm still doing that. As my kids get older, there's still a lot of trial and error. You know, there's new phases of growth and development. You know, my son's 3 now, my daughter's 1, and they have new needs and I have new needs. And so just allowing yourself to evolve, to try new things, and to not be so rigid and stuck on this is the way it should be, because there really is no one way. I like to say that the number of ways that we can mother is as infinite as the number of women who become mothers, because we're all unique and we should bring our individuality into motherhood. We don't, that part of us doesn't die, or it shouldn't be buried just because we become moms. I actually think that's what's going to help us be incredible moms and nurture our kids in the way that only you can, and I can, and the person watching this can. So anyways, this was such a good conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to help us like work through this stuff. And if anybody has any questions, please let us know in the comments. And again, there'll be lots of resources in the description. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you feel inclined, share it on your social pages, or tag me on Instagram, or tag Marissa on Instagram. I think you're at Postpartum Help.
Postpartum Happiness.
Postpartum Happiness. So you're going to have to send me all of that stuff so I can link it in the description. But thank you all so much for spending time with us. Thank you, Marissa. And I hope to be continuing this conversation because it's so important on my YouTube channel. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.